Aimed directly at city-living, eco-minded buyers, this improved version of Toyota's clever Yaris Hybrid is cheaper, cleaner and more frugal than any conventional hybrid model we've yet seen. It may not be the small car you've always dreamed about, but if you're urban-based, it could very well be the one you actually need.
Having originally introduced the idea of a hybrid car, it has fallen to Toyota to democratize it, to make petrol-electric power more widely accessible, something only possible if it becomes more affordable, in a car like this, Toyota's Yaris Hybrid. It was first introduced here in the summer of 2012 as the industry's most affordable hybrid car, the model that finally properly opened up hybrid ownership to the urban-based market segment that, in theory, should take to it most, that of super minis. Here we're looking at the improved version, updated in mid-2014 with sharper looks and small improvements in cleanliness and frugality. It's a car that remains the cleanest means of automotive transport yet devised, assuming you discount pricey plug-in and battery-powered models. Quite a claim. Though this wasn't the market's very first hybrid super mini, it was the first able to improve upon the running cost of comparable eco-conscious diesel models in this segment, while matching or beating them on price, which has made this model a game changer in its town-targeted market sector and, in theory at least, an impossible option to ignore for those who spend much of their lives in the kind of stop-start traffic where hybrid technology really comes into its own. Let's put it to the test. Hybrid technology certainly took its time to fully filter down into the super mini segment, but buyers who've taken the plunge with this Yaris Hybrid certainly seem to feel that it's been worth waiting for. For a start, you get all the cleverness that Toyota's Prius customers pay 50% more for. The standard CVT fully automatic gearbox, the eco mode that tweaks the throttle response and the aircon to cut fuel consumption, and most importantly, the thing that at its original launch set this car apart from the super mini sector's very first petrol-electric contender, Honda's Jazz Hybrid, namely the ability via this EV button to run on electric power alone for short bursts. Such are the benefits of parallel hybrid technology. So what's this car like to drive? I'm not going to assume that you already know what the hybrid experience is like, because if you're a typical super mini buyer, then you probably don't. Press the button to start, and as the dashboard lights up and you snick the little CVT gear lever into drive, you're greeted by the sound of silence that's such a trademark of petrol-electric motoring. So much so that as you gently brush the throttle and the car pulls noiselessly away, you're tempted to wonder whether something might be wrong. But no, this is how it is in hybrid land. How far will it go in totally silent milk float mode? Not a great distance, in fact. Press this EV button and you'd cover no more than 1.2 miles before the petrol engine had to cut in. Something that would happen even sooner than that if your speed exceeded 31 miles per hour. But figures of that kind miss the point. The hybrid synergy drive system is always recharging itself. Even more so if you leave the auto gearbox lever in B to maximize the energy that can be harvested from regenerative braking. The result is that in stop-start urban traffic, the car is nearly always ready to revert to total battery power. So much so, in fact, that Toyota's real-world tests suggest that silent zero-emissions driving with the engine switched off accounts for 66% of the average commuter journey length and 58% of the total journey time. It's hard to square this sort of refinement with a class of car that's usually a bit, well, buzzy at most speeds. This, in contrast, is a very different, very refined, very relaxed means of town travel. Even when the little petrol unit does thrum into life, you hardly notice it unless you happen to be driving foot to the floor, a style of progress you'll really want to avoid in this Yaris. Not only because it decimates your fuel and CO2 returns, but also because the revs rise, the ECVT continuously variable transmission whines, and you don't ultimately end up going that much faster. That's in the mid-range. To be fair, progress from rest is actually quite rapid. Thanks to the electric motor's ability to deliver all of its 169 Newton meters of torque, its maximum pulling power from the moment the vehicle begins to accelerate, the battery-powered part of the acceleration curve from 0 to 31 miles per hour takes just 4 seconds. From there on, though, things slow down quite a lot. For instead of the pokey petrol 1.8 litre engine you'll find developing 98 brake horsepower in a hybrid Prius or 136 brake horsepower in a hybrid Auris, this car has the smaller, feebler 73 brake horsepower 1.5 litre unit that was used in the second generation Prius that went out of production back in 2009. To be fair, it is an engine completely re-engineered for the modern era, with over 70% of its components either new or redesigned. But with just 111 Newton meters of pulling power to call upon, it still doesn't prioritize performance to any great extent. Fortunately, that's largely disguised by the instant urge the electric motor provides away from rest, meaning that this Toyota's quoted 11.8 seconds 0 to 62 mile per hour time is actually around 2 seconds quicker than most comparable eco-minded super mini diesels. That's provided you haven't selected the eco driving mode option that's offered via this button down here by the gear stick. Very often we'll drive a car with the mode option of this kind and wonder why you wouldn't use it all of the time. Lots of efficiency benefits with no particular downside. Here though, you pay for your parsimony, not so much with the tweak this setting makes to the air conditioning, but more with a level of throttle response that becomes laboured and slow. But then this car prefers to be driven carefully. Nurse it around gently, keeping the needle of the hybrid system indicator, it replaces the rev counter here on the dash, in its charge or eco zones, and you'll get in sync with the way this Toyota likes to operate. Especially if you're watching the display on the neat hybrid energy monitor that's there to show you how battery, electric motor and engine are working together. This is, after all, a super mini that really does come into its own when you're doing 0 miles per hour in nose to tail traffic. Is that a depressing criterion on which to buy a car? Perhaps, but it's a truism that many people's daily drive to work isn't all about open moorland roads and beautifully cambered bends. It's about sitting looking at the guy in the car next to you, trying not to rear-end the vehicle ahead as he crawls forward, serendipitously checking Facebook on his phone. This sort of driving can be stressful, but for many, there's no avoiding it. Quite simply, this Toyota takes that stress away. Will that make it feel like a fish out of water when you take to the open road? Yes and no. It's not like a really city-biased urban scoot, say a Smart for 2 for instance, a car that absolutely hates to go beyond the city limits. In actual fact, around the country lanes, thanks to the low centre of gravity of the battery pack, this Yaris Hybrid actually corners quite well with modest body roll and surprisingly good grip. Unfortunately, the rather lifeless steering will leave you unwilling to investigate these limits. A setup clearly prioritised for town use where it facilitates a class-leading 4.7 metre turning radius. The ride's prioritised for urban work too, helped by the extra weight of the hybrid system that makes the car feel more planted and less disturbed over poor surfaces. Not only will you struggle to recognize this car as a hybrid, you'd also have a job to tell it apart from any other conventional Yaris. All of which is entirely intentional, of course. The days of enviro-conscious buyers wanting to trumpet their eco-minded pretensions are, thank goodness, rapidly drawing to a close. Choose one of these and your neighbours won't know you're doing your bit for the polar ice caps, unless perhaps they look a little more closely. Those who do exactly that might clock the hybrid badging and the unique piano black lower front grille with its satin chrome surround. The better informed amongst them might even note the 20mm of extra front overhang necessary to accommodate the hybrid synergy drivetrain. Otherwise though, giveaways to this car's petrol-electric status are few. Here we're looking at the improved version, recognisable by this X-shaped frontal graphic that gives this Super Mini a far sharper and assertive look. Inside, at first glance, it's all familiar third generation Yaris stuff. But look a little closer and differences begin to emerge. The little CVT auto gear knob, the white stitching around the steering wheel and the handbrake, and the blue and white backlighting around the silver ringed instruments. Come to think of it, the instrumentation's different too, with a hybrid system indicator replacing the usual rev counter, with a dial that'll see the blue needle in either charge, eco or power zones, depending on the way you're driving. Much more informative about the cleverness going on beneath the bonnet though is the blue lit hybrid energy monitor you'll find on the display of the improved Toyota Touch 2 infotainment screen, showing you at any given time what's charging or been driven by what. It would be reasonable to expect the usual rather bulky 144 volt nickel metal hydride battery pack necessary for hybrid motoring to impinge upon interior space. It doesn't. The battery pack sits snugly alongside the fuel tank here under the rear seat, which is why you can't slide or recline this bench. And a novel transaxle houses the electric motor, the generator, the power split device and double motor reduction mechanism that the hybrid synergy drive system needs, all in a compact transmission casing that's directly comparable in size to a conventional gearbox. Very interesting, no doubt, for technophobes, but all potential owners really need to know is this: that in this car you get just as much room for people and packages as you would in any normal third generation Yaris. If you're not familiar with one of those, then I'll tell you that on this back seat there's comfortable room for 2 adults, but as usual in this class of car, 3 would be a bit of a squash. At least headroom is less of an issue in this generation of Yaris, thanks to an increase of 30mm in height over its predecessor. Luggage-wise, there's 286 litres of baggage room with all the seats in place. If you need more, fold the 60-40 split folding rear seats down and you're treated to one of the larger stowage areas of any Super Mini, 696 litres. Overall then, a masterpiece of packaging. In many ways, the price of this car is the most important thing about it. Until the launch of this car, buying a hybrid was something you paid a premium for, over ordinary petrol power of course, but also over an equivalent diesel. With this Yaris, Toyota's target was to eliminate that premium, even if it meant recycling old Prius Mark II mechanicals to do it. And largely, they've done exactly that. Something, I have to say, which may not be obvious at first glance. After all, Yaris Hybrid pricing starts from just over £16,000 and runs up to just under £18,000, which you might think to be quite a sum for a Super Mini, even a very clever one. But a bit of perspective is needed here. Remember that this model comes only with 5 doors and an automatic gearbox, along with performance that would make it comparable to a conventional 98 brake horsepower 1.33 VVTi petrol Yaris. That's a car that, with the same body style, a comparable spec and multi-drive auto transmission, would cost only £1,100 less. Perhaps a better comparison, though, would be between this Yaris Hybrid and the kind of equivalently specified Yaris 1.4 D4D diesel that would cost you almost the same, give you higher running costs, and not even offer auto transmission as an option. With all that in mind, you can see why this hybrid variant accounts for over 30% of all Yaris sales. I'm guessing too that a number of customers visiting Toyota showrooms to look at the brand's other slightly larger mainstream hybrid variants might well be tempted by this model, unless it really is too compact for them. It's true that both the Auris Hybrid, which starts from around £20,000, and the Prius, which starts from around £22,000, use the pokier 1.8 litre version of this hybrid synergy drive power plant. But with asking prices for those models pitched 30 to 40% higher than this car, I can see many eco-minded buyers continuing to think that this Yaris's simpler approach to petrol-electric motoring might make more sense. Its only direct super mini segment rival is Honda's 1.5 litre Jazz Hybrid, but that car costs slightly more and delivers slightly less in terms of economy and emissions. Toyota won't judge this car on whether it outsells its Jazz rival, though it should easily do that. No, the brand has a bigger objective here, namely to deliver a hybrid super mini to market with hardly any price premium over a comparable diesel model from a rival maker. Have the company managed it? Almost. The Japanese maker points out that to get a comparably performing Volkswagen Polo 1.4 TDI 90, you actually have to pay a few £100 more than you would for a base Yaris Hybrid. That's the exception, though. It's certainly true that you can get eco-minded diesel models from mainstream brands, say a Ford Fiesta Econetic or a Vauxhall Corsa 1.3 CDTI EcoFlex, and apparently save yourself a few thousand over this petrol-electric Toyota, depending on what you're looking at. But then you've got to take into account the fact that apparent rivals like these are slower, dirtier, thirstier, more poorly specified, will cost more to maintain, will depreciate faster, and don't come with an automatic transmission, even as an option. Personally, I'd argue that it would make more sense to compare this Yaris Hybrid against a Super Mini equipped with one of the latest super high-tech three-cylinder petrol engines now coming to market. A three-cylinder Vauxhall Corsa 1-litre Ecotec, for example, though the returns here really are way off those of a Yaris Hybrid. A closer balance sheet comparison can be achieved with Ford's clever three-cylinder Fiesta 1-litre EcoBoost 100 PS. That car certainly boasts some very clever technology, is great to drive, and is massively frugal for a conventional combustion-engined model. But the bottom line is that it will still go 20 miles less on every gallon than this Yaris, put out 24 grams per kilometre more of CO2, make you change gears yourself, and save you less than £1,000 on the cost of this Toyota. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Yaris Hybrid you really want, then you're going to want to know what you get, as well as all that clever technology under the bonnet. The answer is a reasonable amount. Even the basic Icon variant comes complete with dual zone air conditioning, power heated mirrors, a trip computer, front electric windows, and headlights that stay on to guide you to your front door. Plus, of course, the automatic gearbox that only comes on petrol versions of rivals, and then only for an extra £1,000 or so. You also get the Toyota Touch 2 multimedia system that really makes this Super Mini stand out from some of its rivals. Via a 7-inch colour touchscreen, this enables you to control the 6-speaker audio system, Bluetooth link your phone, and view a rear parking camera. But that's just the start. There's the affordable option of upgrading this system to Touch 2 with Go status, which basically means adding full main satellite navigation, which comes with speed and safety camera alerts. This is a system that can be updated with various apps throughout the life of your car, including OPIO, which gives you personal internet radio, and Coyote, a traffic sharing information package. Right off the bat, you'll be able to connect to local information services to get things like live parking info, petrol prices, and weather reports. Plus, if you've a compatible mobile phone, you'll have access to Google Local Search that'll give you weather and fuel information along your route. This top XL model gets the real niceties with its cruise control, rain sensing wipers, and part leather upholstery. Unfortunately though, it also gets larger 16-inch alloy wheels that make quite a dent on your running cost figures, which is why it makes more sense to buy the mid-range Icon variant and maybe add a few well-chosen extras. These might include the Appearance Pack, which includes a lovely Skyview panoramic glass roof, privacy glass, and a rear spoiler. You might also want to consider the Protection Pack, which throws in front and rear parking sensors, mud flaps, and carpet mats. There's also the option of full leather trim. Whichever model you choose, it'll be fully covered when it comes to safety. The Yaris's full house 5-star Euro NCAP rating was achieved courtesy of the fact that all models get 7 airbags, including a driver's knee airbag, plus ISOFIX child seat mountings. The anti-lock brakes have brake assist for emergency stops, and there's a VSC, Vehicle Stability Control System. Is this the cheapest means of Super Mini motoring when you add everything together? No, of course it isn't. Whatever contender you're looking at in this class of car, a bog standard entry-level petrol variant will always ultimately make more sense over the low mileages that owners of these kinds of cars tend to do. For what it is though, this Yaris Hybrid represents a remarkably frugal way to get about. That's thanks not only to petrol-electric cleverness and things like low rolling resistance tyres and a class-leading 0.28 CD drag coefficient, but also the success of Toyota's efforts in keeping the weight of the hybrid synergy drive system down. Impressively, this model weighs only 75 kilograms more than a conventional 1.33 litre petrol Yaris model with a broadly similar CVT gearbox. To put that figure into perspective, it's less than the weight penalty for having electrically adjustable seats versus manual adjusters in some cars. Of course, there's not much point in Toyota having gone to all this effort if you thrash the thing about. So it's important that you focus on driving this car in the way its designers intended, keeping the hybrid system's blue needle out of the top power section and instead in either the Eco Zone, which designates careful eco-minded progress, or the lower charge section, into which the needle will dip during braking or cruising. Provided you manage that, the Japanese brand reckons that you should get somewhere close to their quoted combined fuel economy return of up to 85.6 miles per gallon for mainstream models, a figure which rises to an astonishing 91.1 miles per gallon on the urban cycle. That's on 15-inch wheels. Fit the larger 16 inches I have here, and the figures fall slightly, respectively to 78.5 and 85.6 miles per gallon. Either way, this kind of frugality makes this 1.5 litre hybrid around 10% more economic than the Japanese brand's 1.8 litre Auris and Prius hybrid models. As you would expect, given that this Yaris hybrid system is 20% smaller and 11 kilograms lighter. And against rival diesels, well, the quoted figure is the same as you'd get in the Volkswagen Polo 1.4 TDI, a little less than you'd manage in a Ford Fiesta 1.6 TDCi Econetic, but better than virtually any other eco-branded diesel Super Mini you can think of. And of course, you'll be filling up with cheaper petrol rather than diesel fuel. Against a high-tech petrol engine, say the 3-cylinder EcoTech and EcoBoost units respectively used in Vauxhall's Corsa and Ford's Fiesta, then you're looking at being able to travel around 20 miles or more further on every gallon in this Yaris. And CO2? Well, here this Toyota has a clear advantage. With the exception of all electric cars or pricey plug-in hybrids like Toyota's own Prius plug-in, this is the cleanest car you can buy on the UK market, putting out a saintly 75 grams per kilometre, a figure not even the cleanest diesel models can get near. This figure gives you all the usual eco-minded running cost benefits, free road tax, free entry to the congestion charge zone, and so on. Overall, you'd also be looking at 39 pence per mile over a typical 3-year, 30,000 mile cycle. That's assuming you choose a base Icon spec mainstream Yaris hybrid model. This top XL variant features larger 16-inch wheels that make a surprisingly big difference to running costs. The combined cycle consumption falling to 78.5 miles per gallon and the CO2 reading slipping to 82 grams per kilometre. Still pretty good though. Maintenance costs will be lower than with a conventional petrol or diesel Super Mini. After all, the hybrid Synergy drive system has proven itself to be super reliable over nearly 2 decades and operates without a clutch, a starter motor, an alternator or a timing belt, so there's no requirement for parts like these to be maintained or replaced. And thanks to the efficiency of the electronically controlled braking system, brake pads can last for up to 60,000 miles before needing replacement. What else? Well, this car attracts a benefit in kind company car tax rating of just 10%, and business operators can claim a 100% write-down allowance for the vehicle in the first year of ownership. Residual value projections are strong, with independent assessments suggesting that after the standard 3-year, 36,000 mile ownership period, you should get around 39% of your original purchase price back. Insurance is rated at Group 8, which will make this car affordable for younger drivers. Plus, there's a comprehensive 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty, extended to 8 years, 100,000 miles for the hybrid system components. It's usually the case that the more you spend on a Super Mini, the more comprehensively you've missed the point. These things are supposed to be cheap and cheerful cars that you don't get too precious about. In the case of this Yaris Hybrid though, I think you'd be willing to make an exception to that rule. It's not some premium soft-touch leather-lined piece of ostentation. Instead, it's a really satisfying, smart and genuinely useful small hatch. A car you could see yourself downsizing into from something a bit bigger and not feel hard done by. You'll find this Toyota about as frugal as the kind of decently pokey diesel Super Mini you could buy for around the same kind of money. But personally, if I was target market for one of these, what would sway me into Yaris hybrid ownership wouldn't have much to do with the balance sheet. No, what really impresses me about this car is its serenity in the city, its refreshingly soothing antidote to the stress of the urban commute. That's something no diesel or small petrol-engined rival will ever be able to match up to. After all, if you do regularly commute in the city, then crawling through traffic probably takes up quite a bit of your day, which in turn takes up quite a bit of your life. If you can't eradicate that time, then you can at least make it less objectionable. And I can't think of a small car that does a better job of exactly that than this one. Clever and cheaper than other conventional hybrids, this Yaris may not be very exciting, but it's devastatingly effective at fulfilling its urban-minded eco remit. And at the end of the day, you can't ask for much more than that.